Hear from Anushal Kumar. He is the Vice President with Constellation Brands. Anushal, please tell us about your business and why delivery of data as a service is important.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about some of the challenges with exploding data in every space. Constellation Brands is a Fortune 500 company with a global operation footprint. We are one of the fastest growing businesses in CPG and primarily operate in three different business areas. The beer division is our largest and significantly fast growing business. Along with the demand, there is also a huge production expansion that has been happening over the last couple of years. Although you may not have heard of Constellation Brands, but I'm sure everyone would have enjoyed the family of Corona beer as well as Modelo and Pacifico. Our wine and spirits division is primarily focused on premium and ultra-premium brands such as Meiomi, Kim Crawford, and Prisoner and Schrader. And they have a huge footprint of wineries across the world. Canopy Growth is our latest venture, which really focuses on recreational cannabis 2.0 and is primarily focused right now in Canadian market. Ultimately, Constellation Brand is a company of brand building. So we are courageous brand builders focused on consumer obsession. And I think, to be a consumer obsessed company, data becomes a very critical part to really understand how consumers engage with your brand and how are they behaving towards the brand and how their preferences are changing over the time, which means that we got to really use data-driven insights as a competitive advantage. So let me give you some of the business context on how our data landscape has been becoming very complex. There are definitely business challenges because of the hypergrowth. So the business has been in this growth mode for over the last 8 years. And along with highly automated manufacturing capacity, we are seeing an explosion in a lot of automation data coming from manufacturing side of the things, as well as new business models around new channels. So over the last 2 years, we have seen that the traditional 3-tier distribution business is being disrupted with a lot of new innovative models such as Drizzly's and Instacart getting into the business of fulfilling consumers' demand. Similarly, there is an ambition from the business to develop a direct-to-commerce muscle, which also demands a lot of data-driven initiatives. We have seen that consumer preferences changes very frequently, and therefore to really get ahead and understand how consumer behaviors are changing, we got to really understand the emerging trends fairly quickly. Digital media, there has been a big shift from traditional A&P into digital media, which is pretty much driving the personalization need for the marketeers because we want to serve better engagement and campaigns which are personalized to the consumers. With cookieless future coming with the browser changes, it has been becoming even more important to have a very robust data ecosystem built with first-party data and supplemented with second-party data from emerging marketplaces. Innovation demand to support a lot of these emerging trends is always there from the business. But then there are also constraints which are being posed from CCP and GDPR perspective that we have to take into account to make sure the data is secured. On the technology stack side, we have been investing rapidly on core modernization, which has driven the analytics demand even more in the last couple of years. We have been seeing a proliferation of new data sources from a lot of the market data places that business wants to use. Machine learning and real-time analytics has become a new way for the business to really get into automated decision making. Therefore, these new patterns of analytic workloads have also become quite challenging to get delivered. And then the last thing that we have always struggled with is various business domains really trying to bring their own analytics tools. So they want access to the data, but they want to really have a preference of an analytical tool that they would want to use. With a traditional infrastructure, which is dependent on legacy on-premise data warehouse, supplemented along with some cloud data pipelines, the main challenge that we have seen in the past is that this central pool of hyper-specialized data engineering team working on on-premise data warehouse had become a bottleneck for most of the product development. Along with the lack of the DevOps on the on-premise legacy data warehouse infrastructure, the data ops seemed to be very inefficient. So as we started looking at what a right architectural evolution would be for Constellation, given all of these challenges, we started thinking about how do we really empower business and product teams to be able to leverage data at speed and scale and be able to launch the products very quickly to the market. This is where the data mesh paradigm came into play. This has been a relatively new thinking, but it lines up very nicely to our kind of emerging needs. The key strategy here really is to definitely leverage the cloud data platform and start offering data as a service or data as a product. To me, there are 4 core components of data mesh that we are trying to implement. The first is really domain ownership. So it's a domain-driven design principle to really move the responsibility for publishing analytical data from central groups into the domain itself, because they are closest to the data. Therefore, the domains start owning the responsibility of publishing analytical data to the rest of the organization and other product teams. The second key concept here is really data as a product. So data as a product means that the domain team not only take responsibility for publishing the analytical data, but they are actually making it available in a way that the organization and other teams can very easily discover what data is used. It's addressable and trustworthy in the sense that the domain teams are now responsible to make sure that they are publishing quality analytical data so that there are no doubts on the integrity of the data. Along with self-describing and interoperability, going with it, when I say interoperable, it's really about making sure that the data is being published so that it can be joined easily with other data products and kind of, it starts offering new innovative products on top of that. Federated governance, again, is kind of, the approach to really move the responsibility for governing the data into the domains and yet provide enough guardrails to the teams to make sure that they are publishing data which has high quality, is kind of, meeting the organizational needs, and it is available as an interoperable service. We have been using a cloud platform to enable this, but one of the key aspects that we are leveraging with the cloud is about making available self-service capabilities for the data engineering platform. So when I say self-service, it's really about enabling the product teams, which are now the owner of the analytical data, but they are able to leverage the capabilities of the centralized data engineering platform to really easily publish, do the analytical processing, and make the data available in an easy form. Therefore, they are responsible for the data lifecycle end to end. The approach that we have taken is to really kind of treat this as a major transformation. In the last couple of years, as we have been reinventing IT, there has been a cloud-first strategy, as well as transition of IT into a product-centric operating model. So we made the data strategy as a key enabler as part of this transformation strategy and took the sponsorship from the very top. We have been doing a lot of socialization so that the business strategy kind of, is really aligned with how the data mesh architecture is going to enable that transformation. Starting small is always key, but then really tying the use cases to very defined business use cases helps a lot. We had a marketing transformation program that was getting started that really dependent on getting these capabilities in place so that the marketers could start taking advantage of a lot of the data products being made available to start testing a lot of the ideas around personalization. So we have made some of those use cases as key pilot for showcasing the value of doing the data as a product approach in this case. Taking an MVP-led approach is always key. So we are starting small, but we are planning a series of releases that starts delivering MVP domain by domain. The idea is that as teams start learning these new technologies and approaches and get better, we scale the migration based on the MVP that is in focus. I think change management is always the hardest part of this. Technology is easy. So there have been a lot of concerns around legacy teams because the concept of data mesh and moving the accountability and responsibilities for publishing the data into the domain is the hard part for legacy data teams who have always been used to centralized data management and data publishing services. There is also has been concern around how this distributed domain ownership will create problems around governance. And we have been kind of addressing it by making sure that people really understand that the governance at scale for data when it is exponentially growing leverages a lot of automation to enforce the policies at the lowest granular level within the domains. I think the overall concept has been really embraced by the business stakeholders because they really like the idea of getting closer to the data, understanding the availability of data, as well as the faster delivery cycles coming with it. But getting the legacy teams to really adapt and learn this concept is going to be critical for us. So we are putting together a lot of learning programs to make sure that as we execute and make this transition, the teams are ready to change into the new way of thinking. Again, something like this is a transformational change, but it needs to be explained as a very compelling story that any business stakeholder can very easily understand how this shift is going to be able to enable in their day-to-day real-time decision making.